will he announce now that his experiment with legalizing hard drugs in BC is over? Yes or no? When will we put an end to this wacko policy by this wacko Prime Minister?
By moving forward with British Columbia as they wanted to try a pilot project, that we are working with them to adjust in ways that make sense. We understand the urgency and we will.
This is the clash that has all of Canada talking. The House of Commons was about to witness a clash like no other when Pierre Poilievre walked in armed with the truth about Trudeau's disastrous drug policies. Did you know that 6 people in British Columbia die from drug overdoses every day? Fergus attempted to censor the shocking truth, but Pierre Poilievre refused to back down. Watch as Poilievre destroys Fergus's attempts to silence him, revealing the dark reality of Trudeau's failed policies.
Respond by be unfair for the speaker to comment on things that happen in the House.
Do you regret how things played out yesterday?
He should resign. He's a disgrace.
I never did have confidence in this speaker.
Canadians expect us to work, to deliver for them, and not to act as children, and the leader of the opposition needs to stop acting as a child.
His policies are wacko. Hiking the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, wacko. Doubling housing costs, wacko.
You could cut the tension with a knife as Pev took the stage, ready to reveal the startling truth that the government had done everything in its power to conceal. His voice reverberated throughout the chamber as he blasted through a flurry of statistics that left everyone in disbelief. 6 people die from drug overdoses in British Columbia alone every day. The statistics painted a grim picture of the crisis unfolding across the country, but Fergus, clearly shaken by Pev's onslaught, couldn't handle the truth. He tried desperately to interrupt, his face getting redder with each failed attempt at point of view. But he persisted, hammering home the devastating effects of Trudeau's ridiculous policies on Canadian lives. The chamber erupted in chaos as Fergus demanded that Poilievre retract his statements, but our hero refused to back down.
The 8th out of the last 9th economic quarter where our per capita GDP shrunk. It's fallen more than any other G7 country since the year before COVID. Canada reported terrible news for the Canadian economy today. It grew at a meager 1%, a third lower than foreseen, and lower than our population grew. In fact, this is the direct result of higher taxes on capital gains, on energy, on work. Why won't they accept our common sense plan? Better yet, why don't they call a carbon tax election so we can fix the economy?
In a superb move, Fergus, who was totally out of his depth, used the only weapon left in his arsenal to silence the opposition when P offered to replace wacko with an extremist or radical. In a startling act of censorship, he threw Pev out of the chamber, but little did Fergus know that this last-ditch effort to hide the truth would backfire. Amazingly, the fallout was explosive, with Canadians from all over the country supporting Pev's brave stance. Social media exploded with words of solidarity and appreciation for P's steadfast dedication to bringing the brutal truths of the drug problem to light. The public's indignation was only heightened by Ferguson's conduct. The calls for Ferguson's resignation became louder by the minute, with many accusing him of being Trudeau's personal censoring agent. Canadians were tired of the government's attempts to ignore the drug problem and weren't going to take it lying down. This unforgettable confrontation confirmed Pev's unquestionable supremacy in the art of debating and his resilience in the face of any challenge.
Per person income is now lower than it was 10 years ago in Canada, while it's gone up 18% in the U.S. The gap between U.S. and Canadian incomes is worse than at any time, while the Canadian economy is snoring. In the most recently reported economic quarter, U.S. GDP grew 3 times faster than Canadian, despite our out-of-control population growth in the last century. Why won't they call a carbon tax election so Canadians can vote for powerful paychecks that buy affordable homes on safe streets?
Yeah.
There you go.
He had endured the full weight of the government's efforts to keep him quiet and come out on top. His triumph solidified his reputation as a genuine advocate of the people. Fergus believed that stifling Pev would stop disagreement, but his actions couldn't have been more incorrect. The people's revolt was about to start, and no one was ready for what would happen next. A shocking poll revealed that 78% of Canadians felt their right to free speech was being violated in Parliament. This wasn't just a small grievance, though. It was a full-blown democratic crisis. and Canadians weren't going to take it lying down. Videos of Fergus muting Conservative MPs went viral, and people watched in shock as their elected representatives were silenced mid-sentence, their voices cut off by Fergus's iron fist. The outrage spread like wildfire, sparking a grassroots movement that would shake the very foundations of power. Protests broke out at MP offices across the country, and everyday Canadians, many of whom had never engaged in political activism before, took to the streets to demand accountability. Their voices became louder every day as they carried placards with slogans like "Unmute our democracy" and "Fergus must go." But the revolt didn't end there. The Liberal Party was in full panic mode, trying to contain the fallout from Ferguson's disastrous actions. When the online petition calling for his resignation gained enormous traction and spread faster than anyone could have predicted. As the numbers increased, it became evident that this was not just a fringe movement, but a nationwide uprising against censorship. The scandal hit Trudeau, where it hurt most of his precious approval ratings as the public's trust in the government plummeted. Trudeau's ratings dropped by a shocking 5% in just 3 months. Fergus' resignation was demanded in a mind-blowing petition. Over 100,000 signatures is a milestone. This was a resounding message, not only to the government. Unavoidable roar of dissatisfaction, the writing was on the wall. Canadians were tired of being silenced and were prepared to make their voices heard at the ballot box. As the movement grew stronger, it brought together Canadians from all walks of life, with blue-collar workers standing shoulder to shoulder with students. Political experts weren't holding back when they predicted significant consequences for the Liberal Party and warned that the erosion of public trust could cause a seismic shift in Canadian politics. Young professionals and retirees united in their commitment to defending free speech. The battle lines were formed, and the struggle for accountability was far from done. The chorus of voices calling for reform grew louder every day. This was no longer just about politics. It was about the fundamental essence of Canadian democracy. The fight for free speech in Canada has reached a boiling point, with democracy itself on the brink. Yet a hero has emerged in this dark hour. Fergus and Trudeau were about to learn the terrible lesson that in a true democracy, the power always resides with the people. For millions of Canadians, Pierre Poilievre, the man who dared to challenge authority, has become a beacon of hope. Since his epic battle with Fergus, P's popularity has soared, and his approval rating has increased by an astounding 7%, demonstrating that Canadians are desperate for a leader who would not back down. Trudeau and his allies are shaking in their boots as a result of the surge in support, but the fight is far from over. With PVA leading the charge, Canadians from coast to coast are more determined than ever to take on the corrupt elites who attempted to silence them. The fight for accountability is still going strong, and the message is clear. No matter how hard they try, they can't silence the voice of the people. The revolution has begun, and there's no stopping it. Well, he announced now that his experiment with legalizing hard drugs in British Columbia is over. They wanted to try a trial project, so we're working with them to make the necessary adjustments. We recognize the urgency, and we'll take action. Did you know that 6 individuals in British Columbia die from drug overdoses every day? Watch how PV destroys Greg Fergus's attempts to muzzle him and exposes the grim reality of Trudeau's failed policies. Fergus attempted to conceal this startling truth, but Pierre Poilievre refused to back down. The House of Commons was about to witness a confrontation unlike any other, and it's the one that has everyone in Canada talking. Armed with the truth about Trudeau's catastrophic drug policies, Pierre PV strode in. I never had faith in the speaker because he didn't expect us to work for them and not act like children, and the opposition leader needs to stop acting like a CH. Tensions reached a boiling point in Parliament as Pierre Poilievre took aim at Greg Fergus and the Liberal government's policies. Fergus's handling of debates, including his frequent use of the mute button, has sparked outrage, with critics accusing him of silencing opposition voices to protect Trudeau's agenda. Poilievre didn't hold back, highlighting the dire consequences of rising taxes, soaring housing costs, and the devastating opioid crisis. His fiery speech laid bare the economic struggles Canadians face, contrasting sharply with Liberal policies that have left many struggling. When Poilievre cited hard-hitting stats, like 6 daily overdose deaths in British Columbia and Canada's shrinking GDP. Fergus attempted to interrupt, only for Poilievre to double down. This led to a dramatic scene, with Fergus ultimately ejecting Poilievre from the chamber in an unprecedented act of censorship. But this move backfired spectacularly. Social media erupted in Poilievre's defense, with Canadians expressing their frustration at what they saw as an attack on free speech. Protests broke out nationwide, and a petition demanding Fergus's resignation garnered over 100,000 signatures. Political analysts predict the fallout could significantly damage the Liberal Party, as Trudeau's approval ratings have already dropped 5% in 3 months. Meanwhile, Poilievre's approval has surged, solidifying his role as a champion of accountability and free speech. The growing grassroots movement has united Canadians across political lines, demanding reform and accountability. This isn't just about politics anymore. It's about protecting the very foundations of democracy. As the fight rages on, one thing is clear: the voice of the people will not be silenced.